What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and we're back for another episode of the fighting game tutorial series. Today's episode we are going to be going over cleaning up our animation blueprint part 2. So in the previous episode we went over how we could improve our blueprint update animation and blueprint initialize animation, or really our begin play for our animation blueprint. So we cleaned it up, that way we were using these events and functions properly, and on top of that we got some performance gain and we stopped doing hacks and things that we didn't need to do, which improves our performance. In today's episode, we're going to continue along with that. So we're going to go into the animation blueprint, clean up a few things that were done either incorrectly or not as well as they should have been. So that's about all the intro we need. If you want to get caught up in this series, you can check out how we've done things like our throws, our projectile, and many more awesome topics. Then feel free to check out the entire playlist of the fighting game tutorial series, where there's new episodes every Sunday. I'll link this right here in the top right corner for you. Alternatively, if you don't care about the entire playlist and you're just interested in making a clean animation blueprint for your project or for your fighting game, I still recommend that you watch the previous episode, because all of these episodes on cleaning up the AnimBP are going to be things that we do together. So seeing all these improvements in a short time should give you a good idea about the improvements you can make in your animation blueprint, even if you're not following along directly with the series. So with that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. This is a code and blueprint tutorial series, but as I mentioned, we're going to be working in the animation blueprint today. Now, while I do want to convert a lot of the logic from blueprint to code, we still have some organization and cleanup that we should do in the blueprint before trying to convert it. So everything is going to be done in the blueprint today. So I want to go to my animation blueprint, which for me is in blueprints, AnimBPs, mutant AnimBP root motion. So the first thing I want to do in here for today's episode is to remove some things that we had initially put in for one-off moves, such as our up from ground mechanic. So we have this up from ground mechanic, which is a certain type of projectile that we were going to be able to launch from our character. So if we come into our game here, I have this quarter circle forward heavy attack combo that I can use to perform this up from ground tornado. And it's a really cool effect, and I do like it, and I want to keep this effect. However, this was done in a very specific method to get this working, and I want to fix that. And we can remove almost all the logic and still make it work. We definitely overcomplicated it, so I want to clean it up today. It's been on my agenda to fix up for a bit now. So again, this is what the effect will look like. We want to make sure we're still matching that when we finish today's episode. So if we go into our animation blueprint, and we go to Event Blueprint Initialize Animation. This is what we set up in the previous episode where we converted the construction and the begin play over to this event. If we follow it along here, we're setting our character references, setting our camera references, spawning the special camera, and then we check for this ground spawn actor. And basically the intention of this is we were going to set an actor in the level that represented the ground. And I had initially thought this was a good idea because the ground, or the actual collision of the ground, could be a little bit deceiving compared to where it actually is, depending on our camera view and depending on if our map is not completely level for any reason. However, we can simply do this just by determining where the character is touching the ground instead. And so the whole idea of having an actor in place there and using that position to find this value, it really is overkill. It works, yes, and it's really not even bad on performance or anything, but it's extra steps we have to do every time when this should be a much easier process. So first things first to fix this up. Each map is what holds this ground spawn actor. Again, one of the reasons I don't want to do it this way. We manually put it in the levels. So you can manually go to each level if you want. Of course, main menu and persistent level aren't going to have it, but training room, for example, will have it because it is one of the maps we can fight on. So if I go to my world outliner and scroll down here, I should be able to find my ground spawn actor. And as you see, I don't even have it in here. That's one of the problems with this method. See how I have to do extra setup outside the animation blueprint to make this projectile work? We don't want that. So I know it's not on this map, that's fine, but I know it works on my side scroller template map. So let's go there, side scroller CPP, maps, side scroller example map. And I should be able to search for it or just scroll down this list to see my ground spawn actor. And here it is, ground spawn actor. So it's at the perfect spot on the ground. At this point we can remove it. Just flat out delete it. Now it is gone from the level. And at this point we can go to our other maps. So I do have 2 other maps in the game right now. A map's a friend of mine, Shadow Magnus made, so thank you for that, my friend. If we go in here to Trail of the Wise, And I'm in this level now. I want to go and make sure that there is a ground spawn actor. I can see it in the level here. So at this point, I want to remove it. Doesn't matter what the defaults are. I just want to get rid of it. Then I can save this level. And then I also have the refinery. And when I get in here, I can see that it is not on this level. But just make sure there's no ground spawn actor. Once you're sure it's removed from all your levels, you can go back to your regular level, which for me is my persistent level because we use level streaming here. And now I can go back to my mutant AnimBP, root motion, and this section here where we're getting all actors of class. This section here where we're getting all actors of class for the ground spawn actor, can be removed. So we don't need this node. We don't need the actual getter from that array. We don't need to check it for validity. We don't need the reroute node. Let me bring all this over so we can look at it fully. We do not need to get the location because we don't have an actor anymore to get the location of. And we don't need to have these reroute nodes because we're going to be setting it regardless. If it doesn't exist, we shouldn't just not set it. We should always have a value for this. I can think of two different methods that are quite easy to implement and both would solve this issue in a way that is scalable. So the first method is to actually use the attacker's position, assuming they have to be grounded to perform this, but even that has stipulations. So the easiest method that I see here is to simply set this ground value, like we were doing, in Blueprint Initialize Animation, when all the characters are going to be on the ground. And remember, even if they're not due to some animation that's playing or anything, their collision, their capsule component, which is the root component, should be. Intro animations can be completely unique from that process. The character does not have to move with it. I really wouldn't expect it to move the capsule collider with it. The capsule collider might not even have any collision on it at this point. See all the steps we were doing to try and make things simple, but really they were making it more complicated? At this point, this is going to run one time. And the characters are going to be in their entrance animation. Their collider is going to be on the ground. If we literally get the characters transform, and really we just need their Z position, that is our height. We can tell because we have the axes here and Z is the height. You can also see it here in this window. And we can either subtract the character's height or have a known offset. This value will always be relevant. It's literally that simple. Also, we're skipping the behavior in here if this cast fails and still doing the other things. I don't think we should do that. At this point, since we've updated our logic, we're not setting the character reference on tick. We're not relying on hacks anymore. And so because of that, our owner better cast to a mutant BP successfully. If it doesn't, we don't want to continue because we're going to run into a lot of undefined behavior. So you see this section where we're getting the pawn owner in Blueprint Initialize Animation, casting it to our mutant BP. And then if it fails, continuing on, I'm taking that out. If you want, you can add a print string here to log out what's going on. So if you do run into that scenario, you know that there's an issue here, but I don't believe we should continue. Our animation blueprint is so reliant on our character reference because that is the character that the AnimBP is on. And so if we can't set that reference appropriately or correctly, then I don't believe we should continue. Additionally, even, since we're not setting the character reference in tick anymore, we don't need this initial section here. Because all this is doing is checking to see if the character reference is already set, and if it's not, we're setting it. If it is, we're skipping this section, but we're not setting it anywhere else, so this is never going to be valid here. So unless you've done some other logic that changes the way this works and this could be valid for you, this is always going to be not valid for me. So I might as well just take this part out, take the reroute node out, and move everything else here to Blueprint Initialize Animation. So now we're going to get the pawn owner, cast it to our mutant BP, set our character reference, and at this point we can assume that the character reference is valid in this function. So I don't have to check it for validity when I'm going to use my ground value. So first thing I would do is get my character reference here. And I want to get my actor location. Now from here we can right click and split this return value or break it because we only need the Z axis or the Z value here. And if we plug this into our ground value, it's going to work pretty well right off the bat. So we can compile and save and test this. We are going to need to offset it most likely, but it does depend on the shape of your object and the size of your object. So you actually could get around setting that with an offset if your object is big enough. So if we come in here and I perform my attack, you see it looks beautiful, actually. With mine, I am perfectly happy with where it's at. If you want, though, like I said, I recommend adding an offset. So to do this, it would be very simple. You could just either plus or minus, depending on your direction that you need to go. So add or subtract, and then put in some value. I would say take the character's capsule component's half height. So if you just type half height, you have the get scaled capsule half height here. This is quite literally half of the height of your collider. So your actor location is going to be the location of the root component, which is our collider, and then we're getting half the height of that. So I would say if you add or subtract this, depending on the direction you need it to go, then plug that into your ground value, you would get a proper result, and you can definitely move it this way. So I will move everything over just so I can fit this in. And Blueprint Initialize Animation is looking a lot better already. Very simple. We can improve this further because we have another section here where we're checking to see if the game mode reference is valid or not. Again, this was only happening because in previous episodes with our animation blueprint, we were using this begin, play, and tick combination instead of the Blueprint Initialize Animation that we swapped over to in the previous episode. Game mode reference is never being set in tick anymore. So there's no way game mode reference is going to be valid in here until we get to this logic, which means this extra check that we're doing is useless and it's just taking up space. So I'm going to get rid of it and instead just plug this in directly. So we're going to get the game mode, cast it to our game mode type, and set the game mode reference regardless of if it's valid or not prior to this. Again, in our case, it's never going to be valid prior to that. And now it looks significantly better. It's easier to use. Our ground value is set correctly. And since we got rid of our ground spawn actor in all instances that I am aware of, we should go to the ground spawn actor and get rid of it. So content, blueprints, functional BPs, ground spawn actor. There's no real logic in here. We were just using it as a position, essentially, and it had a cube on it. We did put a scale and a static mesh and some materials, change the collision, all that stuff, but we really don't need any of this. So you can get rid of the logic in the blueprint, you can get rid of the components, and that means we don't need this actor anymore either. So at the end of the day, we can just get rid of the entire actor. So thank you, ground spawn actor, you have been great to us, but I am going to remove you now, and we'll clean that section up. At this point, we can compile and save our animation blueprint, and everything should work. It does, so now we should be able to play our game, and everything should still work if we've done it correctly. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode on cleaning up your animation blueprint, and if you did, please subscribe and consider supporting the channel through Patreon, YouTube membership, and Discord subscriptions, which so many kind souls already have. So thank you so much for all the love and support. I am incredibly grateful. If you ran into any problems removing your ground spawn actor or cleaning up any part of your animation blueprint, or with any other episode that I have in my tutorial list, feel free to reach out in the Discord community. There is a link in the description, and I would be happy to help you out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.